P-E-L-E, Pelé. This is the name that has had one of the biggest influence on the evolution of what football is today. The name which during the time it was most popular reached every corner of the globe, inspiring billions regardless of gender, race and nationality.
There are very few people in the world who would be recognized in any corner of the globe.
He's the most famous footballer in the world, let's be honest.
The name that ensured a nation could dream after several years of chaos and heartbreak. This four-letter word name was the symbol of a revolution that sparked changes never before seen in the history of the beautiful game.
Before number 10 it was just a number, and after him it was became something special.
He was such a visionary.
He played a game only a few chosen ones have come close to.
At the height of his greatness and popularity, without the use of social media, and in a sport that wasn't as popular as it is today, there was not a single person who didn't know or at least hadn't heard of Pelé.
Pele's like God in football when you're growing up.
Who's the best player you ever saw?
Yeah, Pele for me.
Pele for me is the best of the best.
Pele built the World Cup. It's the house that Pele built. It became this month-long festival made for TV giant events because of Pele more.
His majestic way of playing football, which prioritized enjoying oneself while painting a beautifully colorful art with the ball at the feet, captivated football fans all over the globe and hypnotized casuals, thereby creating multiple generations of players who took inspiration from said art and either tweaked or improved it in such a way which was unique to them as individuals, ensuring they played the game in such a way that gives them internal satisfaction and awakes an array of emotions from the people watching them play.
Brazilian football wouldn't exist as it is without Pelé.
And the famed number 10 was so popular,
Turned Brazilian football into what it is, the beautiful game.
Pelé was everything to football, but before that could have ever happened, football was first everything to Pelé. It changed his life and provided him a platform for his talents to shine, which in turn made Pelé both a football and a pop culture phenomenon. The name Pelé used to sell out stadiums during matches, sell out products during advertisements, and was even able to stop wars.
Pele led Brazil to 3 World Cups in 4 tries.
He scored 2 as a teenager. I mean, in the World Cup final.
Everybody around the world that likes football knows all about what Pelé did.
The hero appears as a 17-year-old kid, wins Brazil's first World Cup.
It's like something that doesn't exist really. It's like a mythical figure in football.
What was your most memorable moment as a soccer player during your career?
Pelé, just like many of Brazil's brightest stars, did not have anything close to a luxurious childhood. His father, who was popularly known as Ronaldinho, was a footballer who played for small clubs in Brazil back in his day and had the progression of his career slowed down and eventually ended due to a devastating injury and the need to make money, as his football career just didn't help him enough financially. Growing up in a poor family, life wasn't easy for young Pelé. He often played football barefooted due to his family not being able to afford to buy him football boots, and would also play balls that were made up of newspaper stuffed inside of a sock. He also had to work odd jobs as a child, particularly as a shoe shiner, so he could make money. Pelé at the time was a prodigy and his father recognized that. Ronaldinho, who played as a striker during his playing days, ensured to coach his son and taught him literally every single thing he knew.
My father used to go to the game or to the training section. I was there with them. He used to talk with me, but he never pushed me to play soccer. Never my father said, no, you must play soccer.
But while his father was doing everything he could to help his son achieve his dreams of one day becoming a footballer, his mother was actually initially against it, as she felt his time was better spent on his studies.
My mother, she doesn't want to see me a soccer player because my father doesn't have too much luck. He broke his meniscus, and then he had to stop to play. Then my mother used to say when I was young, you see your father, you know, he didn't play well, he has problems.
It's not a profitable career.
Yeah, you must be a teacher or a doctor, something like that, and don't play soccer.
Before the name Pelé would go on to dominate the entire globe, he didn't actually used to go by that name. His real name was Edson Arantes Do Nascimento. He was named after the famous inventor Thomas Edison, but they had to settle for the name without the I due to an error made on his birth certificate. The name Pelé, interestingly, was given to him by his friends as a playful nickname due to him not being able to pronounce the name of Vasco da Gama goalkeeper at the time, Pele, often calling him Pele, hence the name Pele.
My father gave me Edson because of Thomas Edison. I was very, proud to be the name of the engineer of the lights. I didn't kick well. They said Pele. I fight with everybody. No, my name is Edson.
In 1956, at 15 years of age, a Santos scout, Waldemar de Brito, who had previously discovered Pelé a while back, brought him to the club and famously told them that 15-year-old boy would be the greatest footballer in the world. And well, the rest, they say, is history. He made his debut for Santos in their 7-1 win over Corinthians de Santos Andrade in a match in which he scored his first goal for the club. In the 1957 season, Pelé became a regular starter at Santos, and at just 16 years of age, he became the league's top scorer with 41 goals in 38 matches. He followed it up the following season with 66 goals in 46 matches, and this earned him a call-up to Brazil's 1958 World Cup squad at only 17 years of age. Pelé was nursing an injury during the tournament, but he soon made his World Cup debut in their third group game against USSR despite the initial refusal of the manager, who was reportedly convinced by the rest of the team to start the youngster alongside the supremely talented Garrincha. Pelé recorded an assist in the match as he became the youngest player to make an appearance in the World Cup. In the semi-final against France, Pelé became the youngest player to score a hat-trick in the World Cup, confirming Brazil's place in the final against the tournament's host, Sweden. In a final which Pelé became the youngest player to play in the World Cup final, he scored twice, thereby helping Brazil to their first World Cup trophy. He closed out the tournament as one of the top scorers with 6 goals and was given the title of the best young player of the tournament. His rise at the World Cup came at a very crucial time, as this particular World Cup tournament was the first to be internationally televised. Moments after the final whistle was blown, he actually passed out and was revived by Garrincha. With his teammates hoisting him onto their shoulders, an emotional Pelé could not believe what had just happened. The boy who was playing in the streets of Bauru in Sao Paulo, Brazil, along with his friends with a ball made out of newspapers and socks, had just become a world champion. 8 years from the tragic Maracanazo incident in Brazil 1950, an incident which drove Pelé's father as well as the entire nation of Brazil to tears as they came close to their first World Cup trophy on home soil in a stadium which was packed to the brim with over 200,000 people in attendance, losing to Uruguay of all teams.
My father used to say, man should be strong, man doesn't cry. Then I saw my father cry when Brazil lost the game.
Pelé promised his father that he would win the World Cup.
Then I told him, Father, no, don't worry, I'm gonna win one World Cup for you. Don't worry. I was 9 to 10 years old.
8 years later, Pelé and his teammates had just done exactly that. This was the day that the legend of Pelé was born, a legacy which will continue to live on to this day. The 1962 World Cup was very different both in the expectations level and how it turned out for Pelé compared to the last one. The only similarity was that Brazil was able to successfully defend their title. 4 years is a lot of time, and while Pelé was a nobody at least outside of Brazil prior to the 1958 World Cup, in 1962 he was a bona fide superstar. Few years before this tournament, many of Europe's top clubs such as Real Madrid, Juventus and so on were trying their hardest to sign him, and upon fears that Brazil may well lose their recently discovered gem, the Brazilian government announced Pelé in 1961 as a national treasure, ensuring he stayed in Brazil and couldn't go anywhere. In 1962, many flocked to Chile, the nation in which that edition of the World Cup was being hosted, to watch Pelé, and unfortunately he didn't last long. After 2 games, one in which he scored, Pelé injured his hamstring against Czechoslovakia, and that was it for him. In his absence, Garrincha and Amarildo successfully led Brazil to their second ever World Cup trophy as they beat Czechoslovakia 3-1 in the final, with Pelé watching and cheering from the stands. By England 66, with Pelé's popularity on a steady rise, expectations on him grew even greater. His people back in Brazil, who finally tasted success over the past 8 years in the tournament, were not willing to give that up. Not now when they had the best player in the world on their side. However, this tournament did not just go horribly wrong for Pelé alone, but for the whole of Brazil this time. The 1966 World Cup was a tournament marred by dangerous tackles, many of which, since he was an obvious target, Pelé was often on the receiving end. Dangerous tackle after dangerous tackle, Pelé was eventually taken out of the match against Eusebio's Portugal, who subsequently eliminated the world champions in the group stage of the World Cup. After this tournament, Pelé swore that he would never play in the World Cup ever again. He was soon compelled to break this promise in 1970 as the whole nation of Brazil, as well as the whole world, would be treated to watching the great man play once again. Brazil, led by former player and Pelé's teammate both in the 1958 and 1962 World Cup winning campaigns, Mario Zagallo, Brazil, this time as the team manager went on to absolutely destroy opponents on their way to the title. This 1970 Brazil team was and still is considered as the best team ever, and with the best team ever having the best player ever on their side, the final outcome of the entire tournament came as a surprise to no one. This was the first World Cup to be televised in colors and was to be the last for a now 29-year-old Pele. His performances for Santos in Brazil's domestic league and his touring around the globe had ensured his popularity was on a level never seen before in the history of football. So unsurprisingly, the eyes of the world was glued to their screens to watch what was bound to be Pele's last World Cup.
Then for me in 70, the World Cup was more important because all country, whole Brazil waited for the championship, and I was maybe the more experienced player. Then was more responsibility.
Pele played every single match and as usual was at his mesmerizing best, producing many iconic moments as Brazil went on to top their group and beat Peru and Uruguay in the quarterfinal and semi-final respectively to set up a final against Italy. And as usual, Pele did not disappoint as he was one out of 4 players to score for Brazil in the final as they went on to beat Italy 4-1. He was given the golden ball as the best player of the tournament, and at this point, after winning his 3rd World Cup, Pele finally cemented himself as the undisputed king of football. I told myself before the game, he's made of skin and bones just like everyone else, but I was wrong. Pele was his generation's biggest superstar. He was a visionary, a revolutionary, and an overall genius. He was truly ahead of his time. His captivating style of play laid the foundation on which the following generation of players built their skill sets upon.
Everything that people relate to Brazilian football as the beautiful game, it wouldn't exist. And it wouldn't exist, especially at this level, without Pele. He made it real.
He was a pop culture phenomenon and was undoubtedly the most recognized player on the planet. He met celebrities, politicians, and world leaders, and his influence during one of his tours actually briefly halted a deadly war in Nigeria for 48 hours when the soldiers agreed to a ceasefire just so people could watch him play. Such was the influence of Brazil's number 10 as during the 1970 World Cup, Pele was paid by Puma, who told him to tie the laces of his boots before kickoff during one of Brazil's matches while the camera zoomed in on him, a stunt which made the sales of Puma boots absolutely skyrocket to an unprecedented level at the time. Pele spent a total of 18 years at Santos. In it, he elevated the club status, taking them from minnows and transforming them into a super club. Pele for a long time held the record for the most goals scored at a single club with the absolutely staggering number of 643 goals in 659 matches for Santos, before it was recently surpassed by Lionel Messi while he was still at FC Barcelona. Pele scored a total of 1,283 goals throughout his football career, but only 757 of them were official goals, as the rest came during the friendly tours Santos embarked on as a way of capitalizing on his popularity. During his overall time at the club, Pele won the Brazilian League title 7 times, the Sao Paulo League Championship 9 times, won the Copa Libertadores twice in 1962 as well as 1963, and the Intercontinental Cup 1962 and 1963. Despite all of Pele's incredible achievements such as scoring over 1,000 goals and 3 World Cups, achievements which has since never been surpassed by any other player, the former at least not at the highest level, many have held views about Pele possibly being overrated, with these views particularly being expressed when it comes to the GOAT debate. Many have come out saying he's overrated, Brazil carried him to 3 World Cups, players were performing tricks long before he came, he never played in Europe, and finally, the defenders in his time were not as good as the defenders today. Pele couldn't play in Europe because of the bill passed by the Brazilian government in 1961, making him a national treasure who couldn't legally leave his country. Now, because of this, he surely wasn't eligible to win the Ballon d'Or, which at the time was exclusive to European players. He also wasn't able to win the Champions League. Even though he didn't play in Europe, he ensured to perform and show his class in the World Cup, a tournament which the Brazilian won 3 times with teams in which majority of his teammates were not even playing in Europe. The point about him being carried to 3 World Cup trophies by his teammates has been based on the fact that in 1962 Brazil won the World Cup without him, and that the 1970 team was already a brilliant team with or without Pele. Pele was as integral to Brazil as they were to him. During the 12-year interval between his first and last World Cup, the national team squad changed significantly, and despite the changes, one thing was constant. Pele always performed. He was one of the top scorers in 58, winning the Young Player of the tournament, and in 1970 he won the Golden Ball as the best player of the tournament. Winning 3 out of 4 World Cups played is no easy feat. On the discussion of whether he could survive in the modern game, some argue that since the modern day defenders are trained better due to the years of intellectual and technological advancement in the game, that he might not be able to cope. But let's not forget that the intellectual advancement was sparked mostly due to players like Pele, as over the years, defenders have learned to be a lot smarter in dealing with trickier players, which means regardless of the era, Pele would still find a way to be a level above everyone else. Pele had almost the same type of training his opponents had at the time and was still able to dominate the matches he played in through his quick thinking and improvisation. So who's to say that he wouldn't be able to replicate that or perform even better with all the technology and world-class facilities which are currently being used by the modern day players?
It's almost as if you've got a player from today with all the advantages of contemporary physical preparation and dietary studies and all the rest of it, and you've taken him back, you've transported him back in time 60 years to show the oldies how to do it.
It also shouldn't be forgotten that during Pele's early years in football, yellow and red cards were not a thing. Defenders had the license to actually take out anyone they felt was a problem to them. Imagine a system where defenders like Ramos and Pepe were able to get away with literally anything. There's a quote that has been going on around for quite some time: Pele did it first. Skills and tricks have always been a part of football from the beginning of time, but the thing that made Pele so special was that he knew how to perform a lot of them, and he was so good at doing them that it became synonymous with him. He was able to merge them all together to create a style which football fans have grown to love and has also helped inspire generations to come. Hence the quote, Pele did it first. He was football's first major mainstream quote-unquote celebrity who showed a side of football that drew casuals in like a magnet and transformed them into lifelong fans.
He was that far ahead of his time. He was a global icon before football had fully globalized.
He was popular because he did things his way, in a time when not many dared to do half the things he was doing.
In world football, because he could do a bit of everything. He was probably the most complete player that the game has ever seen.
In 1974, Pele announced his retirement from football, but shortly after, he got the opportunity to sign what was considered a big money deal at the time, worth $7 million, as he moved to the United States of America to sign for New York Cosmos. As usual, the Pele effect kicked in. Not known as a country where football, or soccer as they call it, was popular, the United States saw a steady increase in interest for the sport the moment Pele arrived. Pele inspired millions. Neymar, Ronaldinho, and so on were greatly influenced by him. His legacy will forever continue to live on through these players and beyond them. Rest in peace, Edson Arantes Do Nascimento. Rest in peace, Pele.